Hello. Today is Wednesday of the third week in Advent. We have the 3 candles lit in the Advent wreath. We're continuing reading Tabitha's Travels, the chapter titled Antonia. "What news do you have of my father?" Tabitha gasped. The old woman closed her eyes, raised her face to the sun, and then began to speak. "They brought the man here in chains," she whispered. "A tall man, a shepherd, and a Jew, and 2 others with him. They mocked him, calling him citizen, bowing down to him as insult. Then they took him to the fortress of Antonia on the other side of the city, where he sits even now in a dungeon cell waiting to be executed." Tears came to Tabitha's eyes as the old woman finished. She was about to ask how the woman knew all this when Zechariah's voice thundered from behind her. "Tabitha!" he barked. "We must go." Tabitha looked back at the priest, then at the woman who was now staring at her. "I thank you for this information," Tabitha said. "And what may I call you?" "I am Anna," the woman said, "daughter of Phanuel, and a prophetess of God." "Tabitha, come!" Zechariah shouted. "I must go now," Tabitha said to Anna. "We must save my father, and then go to Bethlehem to see the Messiah." "I shall send Jotham of Jericho your way, should our paths meet." Tabitha stood and ran over to Zechariah, who said, "I have had no fortune in finding information on your father," he said. "I have," Tabitha said, to the old priest's surprise. "He is a prisoner in the fortress of Antonia." "Antonia!" gasped Zechariah. "That is the fortress built by Herod, but now used by the Roman legion. We must go there at once." As they headed back out through the court of women and then the court of the Gentiles, Tabitha considered that if she had not been stopped from following Zechariah into the temple, she would never have met Anna. "Perhaps God knows what he's doing after all," she decided. Zechariah led the way out through the front gate and down the many stairs of marble. He turned to the right into the very heart of Jerusalem, dragging Tabitha behind him by the hand. Turning first one way and then the other, down the streets he led them in such a maze that Tabitha knew she would never find her way out by herself. As they approached a street wider than the rest, they began to hear the shouts of a great crowd of people. Making one last turn, Tabitha saw a mob of people, all of them looking away from her toward the end of the street. She looked up, too, and saw there a tall tower surrounded by a wall protected by Roman soldiers. "The fortress of Antonia?" she asked. "Yes," Zechariah answered, "and trouble brewing as well." A moment later, screams erupted from the other end of the street. The crowd parted like the Red Sea, and Tabitha watched as a dozen men, Jews by the look of them, came running up the street with swords in their hands. They ran past Tabitha so close that she could smell the sweat on their bodies and see the terror on their faces. But before she even had time to think about these things, she heard the thunder of running horses. She looked back just in time to see 4 of the huge animals galloping up the street, each with a Roman soldier on its back. The soldiers kicked their horses to go faster, and in a flash they pounded past Tabitha such that the very ground shook. As the Jews and Romans vanished down the street, the crowd of people began milling about, talking about what they had just witnessed. Opinions were flying like dust in a storm, and some even suggested that they all join the Zealots. "Tabitha? No, Zealots?" Tabitha questioned. "What is a zealot?" Zechariah shook his head in disgust. "They are Jews who do not know how to behave as Jews," he said. "They think that by causing trouble for the Romans, they will free us from tyranny." "Should we not fight back when we can?" Tabitha asked. We should follow the ways of Jehovah, Zechariah answered, even when it does not make sense to us. Tabitha thought about that for a moment and thought it made a lot of sense. Come now, the priest said, let us see what has taken place at Antonia. They pushed their way down the street as people continued to gossip about the zealots. From what they said, Tabitha learned that the zealots had tried to attack the fortress, but had been easily beaten back by the Romans. Inside, she shivered at the thought that the attack might cause more problems for her father. Finally, the two travelers reached the base of the fortress. It was made of red stone and had a long stairway up to the gate, much like at the temple. A ring of soldiers stood guard around the base of the stairway. They held their spears out at arm's length with the wooden end braced against the ground. This allowed the sun to glint off the spears, drawing Tabitha's attention to their deadly pointed tips. Hold, one of the soldiers barked at Zechariah. Do not approach or you will die. The priest bowed and said, I am no zealot and no threat. I seek only information on a prisoner. There is no information here that a Jew needs except that he will die if he defies Rome. I know this well, Zechariah said, but the information is not for me. It is for this poor child here. A Jew is a Jew, the Roman sneered. Now stand away. All the time Zechariah was talking to one Roman soldier, Tabitha was watching another. He was behind the line of standing soldiers, but was lying on the ground, bleeding. Without asking, and without even thinking, she pushed her way between two of the guards and ran to the injured man. Instantly she saw that he was wounded in the side. She ripped off the arm of her tunic and held the cloth on the wound. Meanwhile, the soldier close to Zechariah whipped around and raised his spear. He pulled back his arm and was ready to release his weapon when Zechariah grabbed the end of the spear and knocked it to the ground. Furious, the soldier spun around and snatched up the spear, this time aiming it at the priest. Hold! The voice sounded like the roar of an angry lion and instantly got the attention of all the guards. The soldier, about to skewer Zechariah, turned toward the voice and yelled, Hold! But Centurion, this Jew attacked me. I saw many zealots attacked today, the voice continued. This priest was not among them, and why would you kill a small girl whose only crime is helping one of your comrades? Tabitha finally found the source of the voice, a tall, broad Roman. Gold ornaments glittered on his red cape. He stood firmly at the top of the stairs, his fists on his hips, eyeing the soldier who threatened Zechariah. Lower your lance, the centurion commanded. Then, with hands still on his hips, he walked down the dozen steps to where Tabitha tended the wounded man. Will he live? The centurion asked. I believe so, Tabitha answered. The wound is shallow, and I have stopped the bleeding. The centurion nodded, then lowered himself on one knee, putting his face close to Tabitha's. Why would a Jewish girl help a Roman soldier? He asked. Tabitha didn't hesitate to answer. Because he is in need of help, she said. The centurion stared at her for a long time and then nodded. And what is a Jewish girl doing at the fortress of Antonia in the first place? Tabitha gulped, then looked at Zechariah on the street below. Zechariah nodded, urging her to tell the Roman the truth. So she did. When she had finished, the centurion stared at her for another long time. I know of this case, he said, and I know the fate of your father. Jesus said, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you. That's in Matthew. What a strange idea. Love those who hate us. Why would he say such a thing? Probably because he has seen the power of hate and the power of love and knows which one works. God is love, 1 John tells us, so much love that there can be no hate or violence in him. So, since we are created in God's image, shouldn't we reflect that love toward others? It's easy to be angry, easy to hate. It's very difficult to love as Christ did. Tabitha is filled with natural love and compassion for people that allow her to care even for her enemies. As the day approaches when we will celebrate Christ's birth, are there any enemies that you need to start loving?